As a front-end web developer, we come across different image galleries across several websites. But the billion-dollar question is, do we need to learn all designs?
Oh shit, here we go again.
Practice, practice, practice is my opinion. Let's hear yours in the comment section. In today's video, we were given a task by a supporter to create an image gallery using HTML, CSS, and the basics of JavaScript. I accepted it and worked on it. But before we head to the code editor, let's check the review of the design. I needed 5 different sets of images. And of course, my VS Code. I structured the skeleton of this gallery using HTML. I added flesh to it using CSS, and this is what we had before JavaScript. Then I added JavaScript to bring it to life. And for the final result, this is what we're having. So if you're ready to level up your skills and learn new designs, hit the subscribe button and let's get started. Here in the code editor, we have linked the HTML file to the CSS and we gave it a title of image gallery. So within the body tag, we're going to create a div with a class name of container. Now within the container is another div with a class name of slider, and the slider is going to contain our images and our navigation buttons. For the images, we're going to create a div with a class name of items. And this items is going to contain our background images. We're going to have 5 different items, and each item is going to have a single background image, which we're going to insert it using linear styling. As you can see here, I used my background image, which is URL, and selected my image 1 as my first image here. I'm going to copy this my background image and I'm going to paste it 5 times, meaning I'm going to have 5 different images here. I'm going to change the second image to image 2, to image 3, to image 4, the fifth one to be image 5. Now, below it, I'm going to create a div with a class name of btn. And this btn is going to contain my 2 buttons, which I'm going to be using them for my navigation. So for the first one, I gave it its own sign, and for the second one, it's also having its own sign. Now, in the CSS here, I'm going to style this my HTML skeleton. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to give it a universal styling. For the universal styling, which I'm going to make it to be margin of 0, and I'm going to give it a padding to be 0. For the box sizing, is going to be border box. In the HTML here, I'm going to target the container. So back to the CSS, which I'm going to give it a dot container. So the first styling I'm going to do for the container, I'm going to give it to a width, which the width is going to be 100% of the body, and the height is going to be 100 VH. Now below the width, I'm going to give it a position. For the position is going to be relative because I'm going to adjust my navigation buttons using position of absolute. Now anything that overflows outside the button, we want it to be hidden, so we give it an overflow of hidden. Now in the HTML here, we're going to target the slider, which contains our items. So now back to the CSS, which will target the slider and target the items. So the first thing we do, we're going to give it a width, which we want the width of these items to be 150 pixels and the height to be 200 pixels. Now in a browser, this is what we're having as the output. Now we head back to the CSS, which we're going to give the same items to have a position of absolute. Then we're going to give it a top, which we're going to make 45% space from the top, and for the left, which we're going to make it to be 40% space from the left. When we're done with that, in the browser, now this is where our image is positioned. So we head back to the CSS and give it a border radius because we want the edges of the image to be curved, which we're going to make the border radius to be 1 m. For the background size is going to be cover. And for the background position of this image, we're going to make it to be 50%, 50%, which is going to focus on the main focus of the image to be in the center. We want when you take over, we're going to cursor to appear, so we're going to say cursor of pointer. And we want when you're navigating through the images, we're going to make it to be smooth, so we're going to give it a transition of 0.8 seconds. For the box shadow of this image, we're going to give it a 0, 0 with a 50 pixel blot, and it should spread 10 pixels and give it a dark color. Now, in the browser, this is the output we're having. So now we head back. In the HTML here, we're going to target now the image itself. So we head back to the CSS and target the slider, target the items, and give it the image. We're going to select the first image. That's the reason we use end child number 1. And we're going to give it a comma and select the second image also. which we're going to give it the same file path, and we're going to give it end style of number 2. So all the styling we're going to insert here is going to affect the first image and the second image, which we're going to give the top to be 0 and the left to be 0. And we want the width of these images to be 100% of the body, and the height also to be 100% of the body. The border radius was initially 1n, now we're making it to be 0. Now this is the output we're having.
Are we ready? Can we handle it?
You guys, I'm too chip.
This laptop is f***ing crazy.
This thing is fast.
Super fast.
What?
You want silence?
You can't even hear it because it's quiet as a mouse.
This MacBook Pro is supercharged by the M4 family of chips, which means
I'm excited.
This is cool.
Oh, whoa.
Wow.
Are you a creative professional, a developer, or just someone that admires technology? Well, look no further, because today I bring to you the MacBook Pro. This sleek powerhouse is not just a laptop. It's a gateway to unparalleled performance, stunning visuals, and an ecosystem designed for productivity. The MacBook Pro has an all-day battery life, so you can be productive wherever you go. It has a magic keyboard with comfortable keys and a responsive trackpad, which make typing a breeze. It has a brand name of Apple, the model name is MacBook Pro, and the screen size is 14.2 inches. For the color, it depends on what you want. The CPU model is Apple M4, and it has a 24GB RAM space with an operating system of Mac OS. If you want more information about this system, the link is in the description box. It will lead you to the Amazon. So actually, this video is not a sponsored video, but an affiliate. Whenever you click and purchase something, I get commission out of it, which is also a way of supporting my channel also. So feel free to check out more information about this system. So with that, now let's head back to our tutorial. So we head back to the CSS and target the third image. So we're going to give it a dot slider and give it items and target the end child to be number 3, which is the third image. So the first thing we do for the third image, we're going to give it a left. So we're going to make some calculation on the left, which we're going to say 40% plus 180 pixels. Now this is where the third image is positioned. So we head back to the fourth image also, which we'll copy it and paste it again. We change it to the fourth image. So we're going to make it for the left to be 40% plus times 2 of 180 pixels, which is 360 pixels. Now this is the way the fourth image is positioned. So now we copy it and paste it again and change it to the fifth image, which we're going to make it to be 40% plus 530 pixels. Now this is where it is. The fifth image is overflowing, but because we gave it an overflow of hidden, we can't see it here. But when we start scrolling, it's going to show. Now in the HTML here, we're going to target now our buttons, which contains our previous and our next button. So we target it in the CSS. Now we give it a .btn. First, we're going to give it a position of absolute. Then we're going to give it a top, which we want 80% space from the top, and from the left, we're going to make it to be 20% space from the left. Now we're going to give it a padding, which we're going to make it to be 10 pixels space from the top and bottom and 25 from the left and right. For the z-index, because we want it to overtake any other thing, we're going to make it to be 99. Now we're going to target the button itself, our next and the previous button. So we're going to give each button to have a weight of 40 pixels and a height of 40 pixels. Now we're going to give the button to have a font size of 2 rem, and we're going to give it a border of none. And the cursor is going to be a pointer, so that when you take cursor, a finger is going to appear. And for the margin, we're going to make 0 space from the top and bottom and 20 from the left and right. For the box shadow, we're going to make it to be 0, 0, and it's going to be 20 pixel blurred, and we want it to spread 10 pixels and give it a dark color. Now from the browser, this is what we're having for our buttons here. So back to the CSS. Now we want, when you hover on the button, we want some changes to happen. So now we're going to target the button and give it a hover. So when you hover on this button, what we want is to change the background color. Now this is what we're having here when you hover on the button. Now we head to the HTML. Just before the closing tag of the body, we create a script. Now we have a JavaScript file, so we're going to connect it from our HTML here, which we target at app.js now. So in the JavaScript here, we have an empty file here. So the first thing we're going to do in the JavaScript, we're going to create a variable name, which we name it to be NXT, and say document.querySelector and select our NXT button in our HTML, which is our next button. So we're going to do the same thing below it, but we're going to target now the previous button. So now, since we have identified these our two buttons, we're going to start by using the next button. So we're going to give it a next.eventListener click. So we want when you click on this next button, we're going to give it a function because we want some things to happen when you click on the next button. Now, we're also going to identify our items, which is holding our images. So we give it a variable name of items and equals to document.querySelector items. And below it also, we identified our slider, which is document.querySelector slider. When you do that, now you give it a .appendChild items, which is going to be 0. In the HTML here, now we're going to identify our buttons, which is the first button to have a previous button with a class name of prev, and the next button is going to have a class name of NXT, which is next button. So when you do that here, with the JavaScript we have just given it, when you click on the next button, we're going to have the images now to be changing as you can see. We head back to the JavaScript and now target our previous button, which we're going to give it an event listener of click, because we want when you click on this our previous button, we're going to need some functions to happen, which now we're going to identify our items here, just as we did for our next button. So when we have done that for the items and for the slider, the first one we use appendChild for. In this case, because it's minusing, it's going back, we're going to use prepend for that. So we give it a prepend items and items.length, and we're going to make it to be -1. And we insert comma and items, which is going to be 0. As you can see here, this is the final result we're having. When you click on the next button, it selects the next image that comes. When you click on the next button also, the number 1 image goes and the next image comes. When you click on the next, the number 1 image goes and the next image comes. That's how it works. So when you click on the previous button, we're also going to be having the same function, but instead of plusing, it's going to be minusing, which the last image is going to come back. We have come to the end of this tutorial and I hope you have gained something out of it. If you have, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We would love to hear your feedback because your feedback is what determines what we create next. And if you want the source code to this project that we just did right now, I'll put a link in the description box which will take you to where you can get our source code. And for the past source code, it's also there. And for the future project we're going to work on, I'm also going to put the source code there. So with that, thanks for watching. See you in my next video.